So the session today is called New Event Formats. And we're just going to explore for about 45 minutes a few different ideas for running chess tournaments in a non-traditional way. And some of the things that you might be able to do to experiment with in your own community of chess players and see if you can drive more engagement or attract new players to your events. And that's what this is all about. It's about how do you get new players and more people playing chess, and how do you engage the existing community that you've got to get them playing chess more frequently. Yeah, so instead of playing 1 or 2 tournaments a year, maybe they'll play 3 or 4 or 5 tournaments a year. Firstly, a little bit about Tornelo. Tornelo is an online event management platform. We started back in 2008, and between 2008 and 2012, we were developed as an over-the-board pairings program. And I was running a number of scholastic events for kids in my academy. And we used to have somewhere between 200 and 300 chess tournaments every single year. And we needed a system that would manage all of those events. And so we built Tornelo as a web-based, a cloud-based platform to help us manage those over-the-board tournaments. Obviously, at the start of 2020, when COVID hit the world, we had to change the way that we were doing things because all chess tournaments around the world were suspended. And so we added an online component where you could actually play games online and built our own online game server. This led us to a position that is very different from any other platform that exists at the moment. Tornelo is a platform that is built for scheduled tournaments, for what we call arbiter-led tournaments. Most platforms in the world are built for on-demand chess. That is, you can come in, you can have a casual game of chess with anybody you like 24/7. You know, and those platforms have different structures, which make it a little bit more awkward or difficult to recreate the type of experience that players will get in an over-the-board event. Tornelo is a platform that helps you to run an event as close as possible to the way that you would be running an over-the-board event if you're running it online. And in fact, now that the world is opening up again and we're moving away from online events and back to face-to-face events, Tornelo is still able to be used. Right? So Tornelo can be used for an over-the-board tournament, or for an online tournament, or for hybrid events. So we had some good examples of that here in Australia recently, where we are still in and out of lockdowns, and we had an event that was scheduled for a state championships with 200 players. It was scheduled for face-to-face, and everybody was planning to come together to a school hall and to compete against one another. 3 days before that event was due to run, the government said, "I'm sorry, we're going into lockdown." Right? And with 3 days, you don't have a lot of time to reorganize much. Because we're using Tornelo, we didn't have to do anything. We said, no problems, just show up, same time, just a different location. So all we had to do was let the players know, instead of showing up at a physical venue, show up online, and the tournament's now going to be online. There was no effort, no work needed to change anything around. Just the players showed up online and they could all play their games in exactly the same way. So Tornelo has that flexibility to allow changes because it's exactly the same system. You won't be doing anything differently when you're running an over-the-board tournament, or when you're running an online tournament, or when you're running a hybrid tournament. Okay, the processes are all the same. Tornelo opens up for registration. Your players can register directly into the platform, so they're straight into your pairings program. You show up on the day of the event, you mark your attendance, or you get the players to mark their own attendance, and then you do the pairings for the first round. And if some of the players happen to be playing remotely, they can be playing with e-boards, or they can be playing some hybrid format. If some of the players are face-to-face, well, some of the players can play face-to-face. And so it's all the one simple system. We have fair play built into Tornelo as well. So as long as you've got the games, if you're playing an over-the-board tournament, you'd have to get the games into Tornelo. But once the games are in there, the PGNs, the moves, we're doing analysis in real time and feeding it back to you after every round. So round by round, you know exactly what's happening with fair play. And that immediacy is really important, because then you as a tournament organizer can interact with the players during the event and tell people, hey, you know, we need to see some behavior change, and you build a community of people who are playing fairly, because you can address some of those issues in real time and prevent it from happening in the next round. It's not nearly as useful to get to the end of a tournament and then remove somebody from the results, because they've already caused all the damage. They've already played, you know, 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 games against opponents and have had some unfair results. And so that's already caused all of those other players to feel like they need also to get assistance in the games, in order to have a fair result. So identifying those issues, you know, I guess round by round, is pretty important. You don't have to remove the players. You just have to, you know, let the players know that you're watching and change their behaviours. And so again, we've had this week in Australia, we've had 5 high level state level events, and in all of those events, we've had 100% fair play, because anytime that we see something that looks suspicious, we will let the players know, hang on a second, you know, it's been one game, you've had a very high score in that first game, let me sit with you and you know, and supervise you. And then the players know that we're doing something about it, that it's very immediate feedback. And you know, we end up building a community of people who you know, just don't think about getting assistance. If you need any help with Tornelo, just let us know. We're here all the time. We've got a great little community that's building, of tournament organisers and arbiters who can help get you, you know, more familiar with some of the features as we go. So the typical tournament formats that people use, just kind of cover off the kind of the background. What is, I guess, normal and mainstream. So there are 2, I guess, categories of tournaments that you would think about. You would think about tournaments for individual players, and you would think about tournaments for teams. If you're running a tournament for individual players, then those tournament formats might be a round robin format where everybody plays against everybody else. So it's an all play all event. A Swiss tournament. Okay, Swiss tournaments are particularly good for large numbers of players with a fixed period of time. And so Swiss tournaments will help players play competitive matches, and that's what pairings systems are all about, is about finding competitive matches, you know, good games, you know, people that are within 200 to 400 rating points, you know, of that same player, so that it's an interesting game to play. Right? It's no fun if you're 2700 and you're playing against a 600 rated player. It's no fun for either person. So for a game to be interesting and enjoyable, it has to be competitive. It has to be close. There has to be some uncertainty in terms of what the result is going to be. Okay, when you get a very big discrepancy between the players' skill levels, there's no longer enough uncertainty in that result to make it interesting. Okay, and so the interest comes from not knowing who's going to win. If you know who's going to win, it's just boring. So Swiss tournaments are great for pairing people who are, or choosing opponents for players who are at a competitive level with a lot of people and a fixed number of rounds, that a fixed amount of time. Knockout tournaments. Knockout tournaments are used at the I guess the highest level more frequently than they are at club level and lower levels, because knockout tournaments don't engage all of the players all of the time. And I have a philosophy, and when I'm running my tournaments and I'm not running any World Championship events, my philosophy is 100% engagement 100% of the time. So I'm looking for systems which will engage and keep everybody interested for the whole duration of the event. Everybody's paid the same entry fee. They should all get the same, entertainment value for their fee. And a knockout tournament doesn't give you that. Knockout tournaments, means that some players get to play more games than others, and all the players who get knocked out, that is half the players in your tournament after the first round, are less engaged or not engaged at all after that point. Knockout events are critical for sports like tennis, for example, because they have a fixed number of courts. So if you're a club with only 8 tennis courts, right, you can only put 16 people on the courts at any one time. It's very difficult to run a tournament with 64 people if you don't have a knockout system, right? You've got to get rid of people because you don't have the physical, the physical resources to run tournaments. Football, same thing. You've got a football field. If you had to have as many football fields as you did chessboards in a Swiss tournament, of course, I don't know where you're going to find that many football fields. So, chess is a really great sport because it is so engaging for our participants, and it's engaging because we can keep everybody in the tournaments all the time, and that's why Swiss tournaments are great, because it's an extra few dollars for another chessboard. It's not a lot of extra space, and there you go. You can engage a couple more people. A common format for online chess on some of the mega platforms is what we call an arena tournament. An arena tournament is just where you play as many games as you can, as fast as you can, and there's not much system. It's kind of a hands-off process. The organizers of that tournament don't have to do anything other than put the people in the room and let everybody just play as many games as possible. Of course, if that was an over-the-board experience, it would be chaos, where there's no system of who plays who. It's just like grab an opponent, sit down, play as many games as you can. It also encourages that play as fast as you can. Get through. You could play 3 games in a really risky fashion, and if you win one of them, you're going to be in the same boat as if you actually sat and thought and concentrated on your game. So an arena style event is good fun, but it's not going to generate the best chess. And so if part of your objectives as a tournament organizer is to create competitive games and help players to improve and make things, seem really important, you're probably going to be looking for a system which gives you more contextual meaning, right? And contextual meaning, like a knockout tournament or a Swiss tournament or a round robin tournament, where every game is important, where it means something to be playing that game. And when you take away the meaning for a game, like in an arena tournament, you have to expect the standard is going to drop and the focus is going to be on volume. So it's like the difference between going to Pizza Hut for an all-you-can-eat meal and the quality of the pizza that's there, right? Or coming to my wood-fire pizza oven with handmade dough and some care and attention, and the quality of those 2 pizzas is extremely different, if I say so myself. The other kind of category of tournament is teams tournaments, and teams tournaments are great for building communities within communities. Okay, so what you're trying to do as a tournament organizer is build a broader community of people who enjoy chess, and of course your community is part of the broader community of chess across the whole world. Okay, and within your community you might build microcosms of smaller communities. Okay, so you can have teams events where people can represent a city, a club, a school. So there's a little bit more social interaction because people already know one another. Teams events are great for increasing your participation because you only need to get 1 or 2 people who are interested in your tournament, and then they bring all their friends with them. All right, so the school events that we run in Australia typically have somewhere between 5 and 10 players in a team. We only need 1 parent or child to be interested in chess, and they drag 8 or 9 other people into the event for us. So teams events are really good ways to capture some new players into your community. Typical formats that are used for teams tournaments are matches. Okay, so like a leagues match or an Olympiad style format, and those teams matches are where the number one player plays against the number one player, number two against two, three against three, four against four, and that might be a 4-board match or a 6-board match or an 8-board match or a 10-board match. It doesn't really matter how many boards are there. The advantage of that is, you've got round by round, perhaps larger teams, and you can rotate players through, so not everybody has to play every single round, and so that's particularly good for leagues events, which are played, across lots of countries. But they're not as flexible because you need to have always four people in your team. So if you had 3 one day, you would struggle to play. Team matches, another downside of that is also if you've got a larger size team, you fail my test of 100% engagement 100% of the time. If you have 8 people in your team and there's only a 4-board match, it means half the players in your team or in your event are not engaged in every single round. Okay, and so a team battle tournament is a format or a system which is more and more common now, where it engages all the players in the team. So what a team battle is, it's an individual Swiss tournament. So everybody's playing and being paired as if it was an individual Swiss, but players from the same team are not allowed to play against one another. So you set these what are called banned pairings or illegal pairings, and you're not allowed to pair anyone from your own team. Now, this is great flexibility because you can have 10 people in one team and 4 people in another team, and the larger team isn't at an advantage. The smaller team isn't disadvantaged, and yet everybody still gets to play all at the same time. Right, so all 10 players can play, and the scoring system works that at the end of the tournament, you just take the best 4 players from each team, and when you've got the best 4 players from each team, that gives you the team score. Right, so a team with 10, you're still only counting the top 4. Right, so it's a very, very flexible system, and it meets that objective that I have at the start, which is 100% engagement 100% of the time. A Scheveningen tournament is like a round robin for individual players in a team situation. So a Scheveningen tournament is where everybody on one team plays against everybody else on the other team. Okay, so if you have 2 4-player teams, you have number 1 against 1, 1 against 2, 1 against 3, 1 against 4, and then player 2 plays against number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. All right, so this is typically a format when you only have a match between 2 teams. It's your club against somebody else's club, your federation against somebody else's federation, and when all of the players in both teams are somewhat similarly rated, so they're at similar levels. Okay, remember, we want to try with our pairings to create competitive matches, to create interest and games where the players have got some uncertainty about the result. Right, if you've got 6 people in each team and you say, okay, everyone's going to play against everyone else, and you've got the top player against the bottom player, if that's not an interesting match, then a Scheveningen style of event is probably not the right format for you. So we've got a couple of principles to think about here: 100% engagement 100% of the time, and competitive matches. So let's think about some of the things that you can change or tweak in your tournament formats to create interest and difference. Now, I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm here to give you some ideas and to, I guess, open your minds to the possibility of doing something different. Right, and then what you can do is go away and experiment. Play around with things and see what attracts the interest of your community. Okay, so one of the things that you can change in your tournament format is the scoring system. Okay, so traditionally, very typically, chess tournaments are 1 point for a win, half for a draw, and 0 for a loss. But there's nothing that says it has to be like that. You can change your tournament system, and a lot of people use a 3-2-1 system. 3 points for a win, 2 points for a draw, 1 point for a loss. Now, fundamentally, that does nothing at all. It's still, you're rewarding 4 points in each game, and you're splitting that between the winner 3 and the loser 1, or the players who are getting draws 2 each. So it won't actually change your final rankings in any way, but what it does is it gives the players who participate a point. And so a player who doesn't play in a round or in a number of rounds will be getting 0 points. And just by showing up and playing all 7 games, you get 7 points. So it's a really nice system for younger players and for novices, because you don't go through a tournament and finish on 0 points. All right, you go through a tournament, you finish with something. Okay, so a 3-2-1 system doesn't really change much fundamentally, but it does give a kind of a different feel to the event. Okay. So of course you can change that system, like win, loss, draw, to any number that you want. So if you've got a lot of players in your club or federation who are having draws, and you want to try and you want to try to penalize the people who get a draw and reward people for going for a win, you can change the scoring system to just anything you like. You could get a bigger score for a win. So you get 5 points for a win and 0 for a loss. But if it was a draw, you'd only be handing out 2 points instead of 5. And so you can play with those numbers as much as you like, all right, to reward wins or to reward draws. Like if you're looking for, if you want more draws, then you could give more points for a draw. Have a 5-4-1 system, right, where you're giving 8 points for a draw between the 2 players. So you can play with these numbers, wins, losses, draws, and of course, forfeits or people who are not showing up, just by playing with the scoring systems. You could award bonus points for non-results. So in the school events that we run at a school championships level, we would give points that count towards the tournament score for participation or a contribution in the class. You might give a bonus point for a particular good move. If I teach the kids how to do castling, I might say, okay, in the next game that you play, if you castle, raise your hand and show me, and I'll give you an extra point for the fact that you've castled. Right, so you can add points for non-chess activities. I even heard of a tournament where they would get a point for drinking a beer, and so you could play in this tournament. Okay, drink a beer, get an extra point. All right, so that was probably Czech Republic or Germany or somewhere with big beer drinking country. So feel free to encourage whatever behavior it is that you'd like to see with your scoring systems. Okay, and essentially that's what a scoring system is about. Okay, you get a 1 for a win and 0 for a loss. That encourages the behavior that you want to see. It encourages a win. So if there's some particular behavior that you'd like to see, you can encourage that by giving it points. Okay, so in my kids' classes, I want to encourage kids to castle. So I'll give points for castling. If you're in a tournament that you want to encourage people to drink beer, give them a point for drinking beer. Okay, so that's what points are there for, to give, to drive behavior. If you don't want people having draws, give them less points for a draw. They're going to be less motivated. All right. For all the economists out there, you're going to be very interested in how you can tweak things around, because it's kind of supply and demand. All right, what else can you change? You can change the way that you generate pairings, and this is probably one of the I guess most common changes that people make in their tournaments. Right? How do you pick an opponent? How do you create a pairing? Right? Now remember, the objective should always be to try and create a competitive game, a game where you don't know what the result is going to be before the result starts. Okay, and there are a lot of different ways that you can go about choosing an opponent in a Swiss style of tournament. That is, you got a lot of people and a fixed number of rounds. How do you choose the opponent that you play? Okay, so there's this system called Kaiser, a Kaiser system, which is used in a number of places in Europe, particularly I think the Netherlands. That system doesn't require players to always play against a different opponent. Okay, you can play against the same opponent 2 or 3 or 4 times, because in a lot of situations, you'll get a more competitive game if you play against the same opponent rather than if you have to float all the way down to the bottom player in the tournament. Okay, so this idea of competitive games, of good matches, right, might be a higher priority for you than because of the nature of the players who are in your tournament. It may be a higher priority to play against somebody you've played them before in the same tournament, but it's going to be a much more competitive game than playing somebody at a much lower level. All right. So Keyser tournaments can be used for very large numbers of rounds. You can play 18-round, 20-round tournaments. You can, often you maybe do that at a club where you play one game a week, maybe for half of the year, and you don't have to worry about running out of opponents to play. The Kaiser system also changes the scoring, and you get different numbers of points depending on who you play against. And we'll circulate these slides afterwards, so you can follow the link and see a description of the type of the actual rules that are used in that system. A McMahon system, right, which is similar to an acceleration. So it's similar to acceleration. So acceleration is where you give virtual points, okay, or fake points to people for the purposes of pairing, and you do that to ensure more competitive games. So if you've got a very large tournament, so more than 2 to the power of n being the number of rounds. So let's say you've got a 5-round tournament. In a 5-round tournament, in order to guarantee that that no player finishes on a perfect score without having met any other player, you would only be able to have 32 people. You need 2 for round 1, 4, 8, 16, 32. All right, in order to guarantee that 2 players can't play all their games, get 2 perfect scores, and then you can't really determine a winner because both people have got a perfect score. So acceleration is often used when you've got more than 32 players in a tournament to try and get those top players to play against each other earlier on in the tournament. So if you had 64 players in your tournament but only 5 rounds, you might do an acceleration where you give the top half of the players in the tournament a 1 point or a 2 point acceleration. So that means they have to play against each other in the first round rather than in the second round. Right? And so by doing that, the top players play against each other, and it reduces the likelihood of 2 players finishing the tournament with a perfect score of 5 out of 5. So a McMahon system can give you even more of an acceleration. Okay, so it can give you even more options in terms of acceleration. I've seen some interesting systems where they give a very high acceleration. So it ends up being a Swiss tournament where, let's say you divide the tournament into quarters, and the top quarter of the tournament, you give all of those players, say, 8 points in advance. So, in a 7-round tournament, they will never meet the players in the bottom quarter. Right? Then in the players in the second quarter, you give them, say, 4 points. So after some rounds, the players in the top quarter who are on 0 out of 4 will start playing against the players in the second quarter who are on 4 out of 4, right? Because now they're on the same score because they've got a 4-point bonus. So it means that they can have some cross-pollination, but it's going to come later in the tournament. It's going to be quite rare, only at the top and the bottom ends. Right? Then the next quarter down, you might give them 2 points. Okay, so again, there'll be a little bit of blurring between those sections. But not so early on. And then the bottom quarter, no points. But of course, the top players in the bottom quarter, after 2 rounds, they've got 2 points. They could start playing against people in the next section with 0 points. So you can have some interesting acceleration type of systems using McMahon or using there's also another system called a Monrad system, which is where you're ranking players in the Monrad system according to their scores, and you're just playing 1 against 2, 3 against 4, 5 against 6, and so on and so on. So and you allow players to play each other multiple times. So you can just say, right, we're going to just rank all the players in score order, and it's 1 against 2 rather than top half versus bottom half. And again, what you're doing there is you're trying to give as games that are as close as possible, in a competitive sense. So if you're the top 2 players in the tournament, you're probably the most competitive. Okay, and so you can also add to that slightly different system some some acceleration or bonus points to mix things up. You could do just completely random as well. that's also an option where if you've got a bunch of players, you could just go random with it all. So just again, like I said, this is not here to tell you any particular system to use. What you should be doing. It's like, how do you think about changing things so that it's not always the same Swiss style tournament? Well, you could change the scores, but you could also change the way that you pick opponents. The next thing that you could change would be to introduce some sort of handicaps. Okay, so one of my favorite handicap systems is what we used to play at our club, which is a losing points Skittles tournament. So the way that a Skittles tournament works is Skittles is, well, obviously the candy, but it's also the 10-pin bowling, where you try and knock down the pins at the other end. So a Skittles tournament is actually a knockout style of tournament, but it's a knockout tournament which gives close to 100% engagement. So what we do is we give everybody in the tournament a certain number of points based on their rating. The players at the top will get, say, 1 or 1.5, and the players at the bottom might get 6. Okay, then you play a Swiss tournament. Okay, and the players at the top, top half versus bottom half, they play their games, and off you go. When a game finishes, for pairings purposes, you get a 1 point for a win, but your Skittles points, you lose point each time that you lose a game. So if you start with, say, 6 points, if you're the bottom player, you can lose 6 games before you're knocked out of the tournament. So you're guaranteed to play 6 games. If you lose 6 in a row, you're out, right? And so you can count it. You can count it the other way as well. You could say, well, your Skittles score is 6 or your Skittles, you have to count it backwards. So yeah, you lose 6 games and then you're out of the tournament. For the top player in the tournament, they might only have to lose 1 game before they're knocked out. All right, so then you can just go through and you can allocate points to every single person in the tournament, which makes for very interesting events, because the lower rated players just have to kind of survive. You just have to beat 1 stronger player or 2 stronger players in the tournament. You can get right through to the final round. It makes it very interesting at the end of the tournament. So you get down to your last 3 or 4 rounds, and there's a knockout system in place. So it becomes quite exciting, right? The bottom players in the tournament haven't been knocked out after round 1. They've still played 6 games because they've won 0 out of 6. They got but it's a Swiss tournament, so maybe after 5 rounds they're playing against someone else who's also won 0 out of or 1 out of 5, and so then maybe they'll get a win. So Skittles tournaments is one of my favorite ones because my rating is around hovers between 2,000 and 2,100. And so, at that point, I don't have much chance of winning a tournament at the club because we've got a number of IMs and, much stronger players than me. But I would often have a chance of winning a Skittles tournament because I start with, say, 2 or 3 points. And so I've got to lose 2 or 3 games before the top players in the club, the IMs, have to lose just 1. So eventually they'll play against each other, knock each other out. Fantastic. I get to come through. The other system that I used to use a lot for kids, for handicapping people, was time controls, where you can give people different time limits. This obviously doesn't work so well if you're playing kind of classical time control tournaments, because the difference between 90 minutes and 60 minutes a game may not be a very, very big difference. But at the rapid end of things and the blitz end of things, it does make a big difference. Okay, so you could have, I used to run a kids tournament where I would play in the tournament against all the kids, and of course that was completely unfair. And so I would get 1 minute on my clock, and they would have 15, and that time imbalance really evened things up and brought me down to about a kind kind of equivalent of one of the players who was sort of around 1500. And so that meant that a kid who's 14, 1500 has a competitive chance of winning the game, right? And it's all about how do you make those games more competitive? How do you give a better chance to the lower rated player of winning the game or scoring a prize in the tournament? So yeah, how do you can think about different ways that you can handicap. You can obviously have handicap on pieces as well on the board, but if you handicap pieces on the board, obviously you're changing the dynamics of the game quite a lot. Okay, you can also change the game mechanics. This is one of my favorite ways of doing things. Chess variants. I love the fact that you can play a game of chess with the same chess pieces, but you just like tweak a couple of the rules, and all of a sudden it's like a completely different game, and it is so engaging. Team games, transfer chess or bug house, where it's two players on chessboards, you're passing pieces to one another, was one of my favorites as a kid. There's like unlimited numbers of variations. Of course, the very most the ones that are kind of most similar to standard chess and the ones that get used the most would be things like chess 960, where you just mix up the back row of pieces, and so it just avoids opening theory. And again, like, why are we doing this? We're avoiding opening theory in order to try and make the games more competitive. All right, you've got one player in the tournament who knows a lot of opening theory, one person who doesn't know any opening theory. Right? If that's going to be too big an advantage, you remove that advantage from the player, and you make the game, the result of the game more uncertain. So Take Me Chess is another very popular one where you have to try and lose all of your pieces. But like I said, there's hundreds of them, and I've got a book which is called I think it's just called Chess Variants, and there's like 800 different variants that you can use. Make your own up as well, but there's heaps of different variants that you can use. And a lot of them, especially if you're running kids style events, they have really good educational value as well. So they're very good from a teaching perspective, because they focus on some particular idea. So I play sometimes a game with kids where it's just a normal game of chess, but you have one turn. So when it's your turn, you've got one opportunity in the game to play two moves in a row, right? And you can't use that to take your opponent's king. You've got to put them in checkmate. But just having that one change to the rules means that all the time players are starting to think two moves ahead. They're going, all right, cool. If I had two moves, can I get checkmate? What can I set up so that next time if I have two moves, I get checkmate? And just by changing the rule, all of a sudden, kids who are thinking just like, what's my next move going to be, and only one move ahead, start thinking two moves ahead, right? So, little things like that. It doesn't have to be a completely, new game with, wizards and dragons and, every piece moving differently and different shaped boards or anything like that. It can be just a very small, addition. It's like, you get one bonus move during the tournament, during the game. You can use it anytime you want. If you want to play E4, D4 on move one, good luck to you, right? If you think that's a big enough advantage, but maybe it's not, maybe you want to wait for a situation where you can play, bishop G5, bishop takes queen on D8, you win a queen. Or maybe you want to wait for a time where you can play queen H5, queen F7, checkmate, right? So, it just gets people thinking in a different way. So variants, changing the mechanics of the game. Thematic events, a lot of fun, where you say, okay, we're going to start from a particular position. Okay, we're going to all play the Sicilian Najdorf opening, or we're all going to play from this end game position, right? And so, you're creating a theme for the event. You can play team or consultation cooperative type of matches. Okay, so maybe you've got two teams that have got to vote together on a move, like the famous World versus Garry Kasparov match where the whole world had to vote on a move, and you get the whole team collaborating together, discussing what the best move is and voting on that. You can have a hand-brain situation where you team up a strong player with a weak player, and the strong player says to the weak player, okay, we're going to move our bishop this round, right? And the weak player has to choose where they move the bishop, right? So you got the brain that tells the hand where they're going to move, and then the hand like just moves it to some random place, right? So that's a really cool, fun thing for a strong and weak player to work together, because the weaker player gets like a huge benefit. They know what piece is the best piece to move. If they've got a grandmaster sitting over their shoulder saying, "Hey, move the bishop," they just don't necessarily know where the bishop should move to. So maybe they play, bishop b5 instead of bishop c4, and the grandmaster's like, why'd you do that? So fun things like that. The other one called Kriegspiel, which I like as a chess variant, which is kind of a three-player game where two players are sitting facing away from one another, and they can only see their pieces, right? And then there's a kind of a board in the middle that is that's the true position, but you're playing kind of with outside of your opponent's moves, right? And you can just play the game. And the opponent, there'll be an umpire in the middle that tells you whether a move's legal or not. Anyway, there's lots of different mechanics of the game that you can change, different thematic events or variants that you can introduce to change things up. You can change the structure of the tournament, so you can have pool events leading through to a finals, right? And so you can look at other sports, for example, for how this works. So pools and finals works really well in, like, say, the football soccer World Cup, right? Where you don't want everybody coming from all over the world into one giant event. You want to have a number of pool events, and then the winners from each of them can qualify through to a finals, right? So that makes a bit of interest at the lower level. You can have a Grand Prix tournament, so like in the Formula One car racing, where you want people to be playing for a season. You want to encourage participation in lots of events, and so you're collecting points from different events. And once you're doing that, you can do all sorts of interesting things. You can have double points events and single points events, and things where you can make some events more important than others as well. So you can play around with the structure of the event. You can run a system called quads, which is I've used a lot of times before, which is maybe kind of halfway between changing the structure and the pairings. So in a quads tournament, you've got a 4-player round robin, and you've got a number of 4-player round robins. So if you had 16 people in your tournament, you'd have 4-player round robins. They play those 3 rounds, and then there's a winner, and the scores are tallied up. If you win a quad, if you win a section, you move up into the section above, and the loser moves down to the section below. Right? So you're always moving up and down, and so each quad will have top quad will have only one person different in the next 4 rounds. So you play 3 of the players the same, and 1 new person moves in. But the second section, 1 person moves up and 1 person moves down. The winner goes up and the loser goes down, and they get 2 new people, somebody from the top and somebody from the bottom. And so you've now got a different group of 4. So what you're trying to do is maintain that, competitiveness of play. So you've got players that are at a very similar standard to one another. It's a 4-player round robin, but then you want some progression and relegation system. So you get a little bit of diversity in the opponents, and you give the opportunity for somebody to kind of climb their way up from the bottom of the tournament as they're improving through to the very top. Okay, so this quad system has been used in a number of places. You can just change the way that you award prizes. Again, prizes motivate certain behaviors. So if there's type of behavior that you'd like to see in your tournament, award a prize for that. Have a fair play award for the player who allows a take back after a mouse slip in your online tournament. Right? Fair play reward will encourage more people to behave in that way in the future. Okay, so you can have girls' prizes if you want to encourage more girls to participate. You can have all sorts of special ratings prizes and different awards. So think about how could you change the system. I've seen some attempts at people who love a bit of maths at having and they use this in backgammon a lot, where you can choose your entry fee, but then your prize money is based on the entry fee that you paid. Right, so it's a little bit of gambling, I guess, in there, where the players can say, look, I just want to pay a very low nominal entry fee. If I won the tournament, I'm getting no prize money. Or you could pay a very high entry fee, but when you win, you get a much bigger share of the prize pool. So again, different things that you can do to motivate different behaviors, kind of fun, interesting things when it comes to the prizes. I often talk about this idea of eventification or gamification. So what we're trying to do is make your events fun, right? This is not just come in, sit down quietly, shush, have a game of chess, because especially today, you can play a game of chess anywhere, anytime, right? I can be on a bus, I pull out my phone, I go to a mega site, and I can play a game of chess against anyone I want. So we're not running, chess games, we're running events. And events have atmosphere, events have context, events have meaning, and events have, often a social community component to it. So what can you do to make your event an event and not a bunch of games of chess, right? Halloween events I've seen where people are getting dressed up and playing chess in costume. Christmas events where you're giving gifts to one another and celebrating, drinking events if you're in the Czech Republic. So what can you do to make it more of an event? This table at the bottom here shows a tournament that we've been running online. It's an online tournament in Australia that we do for kids, and we have a number of different kind of Zoom rooms where people can go. So it's a bit like if you imagine in your physical tournament, you've got your tournament hall and you play your games nice and quietly and serious games there. But afterwards, you can walk out of the tournament hall and there are other rooms that you can go to. And we've got a chill out room, and you go into the chill out room and there's some music playing, and the kids play like online Pictionary and online tic-tac-toe, and there's a facilitator doing quizzes and trivia, and it's just a place where you can go and chat. You can relax. You can imagine if it was, in a physical space, you'd have other board games there. You'd have music playing. You'd have bean bags. You'd have snacks, and they can go in there and just chill out and just have a social experience. We've got a puzzle room. They can walk into that puzzle room and they're solving problems all the time. They're getting kind of coaching lessons going on all the time. Right, so they could go, well, I want to learn something more about chess. I'm interested in something, and you go in there and you talk to a coach and you see the lessons that are going on. We've got a room where they go for one-on-one game analysis. So they would have a private coach, and they go with their coach into that analysis room, and they get analysis of their games. All right, so we've got all of these different spaces that the players can go that will keep them engaged, because we run, over the course of 2 days, we run maybe seven games at a reasonably rapid time control. So there's a lot of downtime, and especially in kids tournaments where some people finish very quickly. You might have a 30 minutes each on the clock, so the games are going to take an hour, but some people finish after 5 minutes, right? So what do you do with those players who finish after 5 minutes? You have to keep them engaged, and so this is our way of doing that. And we actually give people different entry fee options for this event, where we say to people, look, if you just want to pay and play in the tournament, just pay to play in the tournament. But if you'd like to access some of these other things, you can pay a little bit more, right? And so we charge a little bit more if you want to access the coaching, a little bit more again if you want to access some game analysis one-on-one after the rounds. So you can actually turn that into kind of a business opportunity for your organization as well. So think about eventification. Your main idea for all of this is innovate. Like you've got 2 objectives. One is to keep the players who are playing chess in your community interested and get them playing more often. And the second objective is to get new people coming into your system, right? It doesn't matter how good your tournaments are, you will always have some, what we call attrition, people moving on, stopping, leaving your community. Now, whether that's because they get old and die, whether that's because they leave your country and move to a different country, it doesn't matter. There is always an eroding of the number of people who are playing chess. So you have to have a system, you have to have a way of generating new business and getting new people coming into your tournaments. Okay, so what we're trying to do is mix things up, experiment with things. How do you get new people coming in? How do you engage the existing players so that they can play more often and stick around for longer, right? Ask people. That's one way that sometimes we forget about, is just to ask people. Do a survey. Get a SurveyMonkey account. It's free. ask a few questions. What's important to you? Maybe you're getting a change in the demographics, a shift in your community. They're looking for faster games because there's more pressure in life, right? And this happened with tennis in Australia, where the numbers of participants in tennis tournaments just was dropping, because the club tennis tournament style was matches. And so it would take 4 to 6 hours to finish all of your matches in these teams tournaments. And they introduced like speed tennis, basically. It's 4 game sets, and when there's no deuce, you get to deuce and the next point wins, sudden death at deuce. So these tennis games, then the games were shorter, the sets were shorter, and you could guarantee within an hour and a half, the whole match was over and everybody was going home. And the participation doubled, right? Because the community, society was looking for, a shorter, more definite finish time. So maybe the days of classical time control, 90 minutes plus an hour after every 20 moves, maybe those are over. Maybe people don't want these, never-ending time controls where you don't know when you're going to finish, where you could be there, starting your game at 7 p.m. You could be there till 1 o'clock in the morning. You want to get up and go to work the next day, right? So maybe people are looking for shorter, more finite, definite finish start times. They say, look, I can commit an hour or an hour and a half, and that's it. I want to know I'm getting at 7 o'clock. We start at 7 o'clock. I'm walking out the door at 8:30. Even with the longest game possible. So ask your community, what they want, and you might find that you can change your tournament structures to meet the needs of those people. This was just a kind of some background into a festival that we were organising, where we had a bunch of different event formats in one festival. So we had an open Swiss. There was a 14-round open Swiss, but people could only play in 7 rounds, right? And you had to choose which 7 rounds you wanted to play in. Now, wow, that's really interesting, because it introduces an element of, strategy, like which 7 rounds do I pick? But it also introduces an element of convenience, where people don't have to play, the whole time. We had a losing point Skittles. We had, kind of these almost like a quads, where there was a number of different round robin events that had qualifications through. We had the team battle style teams tournament. So you can have 4 players or 15 players, and it doesn't make a difference. You're still a team. It's the top 4 that win. Multi-stage qualifying events where you'd have, pools and then qualify to a finals, and then the finals would qualify you to a knockout match. So kind of an interesting, different, I guess progression. So you can end up with 2 people on the stage at the end and a bunch of spectators. We had a thematic event. So, Queen's Gambit was such a popular Netflix show. I don't know if you want to have a thematic event for Squid Games, but you come up with some theme for your games, right? We had a blitz marathon where you just have to keep playing until you pass out, basically, right? Just it's a never-ending tournament. Last one standing wins. We fiddled with time, with scoring systems. We fiddled with variants, and we even had a medley. So a decathlon or a biathlon, in the Olympics, you get multiple sports and you collect points from each of those different sports. So, we had a tournament where you would have to play 4 games of chess against each opponent, but one was normal chess, one was take me chess, one was some other variant. And, so you can then say, well, you're playing 4 different games, and you're collecting points from different games. You could have different, like round 1 could be standard chess, round 2 could be take me chess, round 3 could be bug house, round 4 could be something else. So you can play with that and come up with different things, and that was, those medley events were a lot of fun. All right, so that kind of brings us to the end of the session today. I hope it's kind of given you some ideas about kind of things to think about when you're playing, when you're structuring and organizing tournaments. Some kind of themes, engaging people, creating interest in matches and uncertainty of results, driving particular behaviors if there's particular behaviors that you want to try and drive, and some different ways that you might be able to experiment with some of those things. Tornelo is free to use. It's out there. It's a community system. Anybody can jump on and start using Tornelo straight away. We've got help files, we've got user manuals, we've got a great little community of people on Discord that are helping each other out as well. And we run these webinars every month, and we share these on YouTube for people to get other ideas. Tornelo's objective is for everybody in the world to run better chess tournaments. We want more people playing chess more often and for longer. So, however we can help with that, that's what we're all about. Thank you very much for joining in today's session. If there are questions, you can post them in the chat, and we'll try to answer those questions for you. But otherwise, I hope you've had a good session today, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.